There are two main goals for this target. This is target 4.1.2.1. One goal is to locate fractions on a number line, and the other is to use models to order and compare whole numbers and fractions, including mixed numbers and improper fractions. Like I said, we will be comparing fractions. An example of a fraction is just 1/5. We will be comparing mixed numbers. An example of that would be 2 and 1/5. And we'll be comparing improper fractions, and an example of that would be 5/2. When you think about the picture of 3/4, most of us think, or I think of, a pizza, and I think of eating 3 out of the 4 pieces. But that does not make one whole. So that tells me that my number line does not have to go past one whole, because it isn't even one whole pizza. So I'm going to start at 0 and go to one whole. Now another important part is this 4. We were saying 3 out of 4. So between 0 and 1, we need to put 4 spaces on our number line. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And I need to move on my number line 3 out of the 4. So I will need to go 1, 2, 3. And when I get to 3, that is where I will place my dot on the intersecting lines. This place marks 3/4. Now we are going to put a mixed number on a number line. This mixed number is 2 and 3/4. This means that I have two whole pizzas, or 2 wholes of anything, 2 whole, and then I also have 3/4. So I need to think about 3 out of 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3. So now I have 2 wholes, and then I have 3/4 of another one. So now when I think about my number line, if I start at 0, I need to at least have my number line go to 3, because I needed to use 3 circles. So if I start at 0, I need 1, 2, and 3. So now I have enough for my next part. So I need to go 1 whole, 2 wholes, and now I need to go 3 out of 4. So I need to make 4 pieces here, which you may have 4 in all areas, that's fine, but 3/4, so I go to 2, which is right here, and then 3/4, 1, 2, 3, and I place my dot right there for 2 and 3/4. Right now we're going to work with improper fractions, and improper fractions are fractions that have the numerator or top number larger than the denominator or bottom number. So to place this on the number line, we're going to start with 0. And we take a look here that between 0 and 1, our first 2 whole numbers, between 0 and 1, I'm going to need to have 4 spaces, or 4 hops, because 4 is the boss of this fraction. So let's see if I made 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, I have 4 spaces between my 2 whole numbers. Now if I do those 4 spaces, that would bring me to 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. 1 whole is the same as 4/4. But I don't want just 4/4, I want 5/4. So now I need to add another whole number. So I have for whole number 0, 1, and now I need 2. And since I have 4 spaces between 0 and 1, I need 4 spaces between 1 and 2 as well. So now I have between 1 and 2, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So now let's start at 0 and see if I can find 5 fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4. So I'm going to mark on my number line 5/4. And 5/4 then, this tells me, is equivalent to 1 whole, because I see it's after 1 whole, and then I'm going to do 1 hop out of 2, 3, 4. So 1 out of 2, 3, 4. So that would be 1 and 1 out of 4, 1/4. 1 and 1/4. Now we're going to take a look at a model to help us figure out fractions and if they are equivalent or not. So when I take a look at this model, I see that it starts on 0 and it goes to 1. That's an important thing, to look at the whole numbers first. So I start on 0, I go to 1. And how many spaces are between 0 and 1? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Since there's 4 spaces, that means that I'm dealing with fourths. Now I need to see where my model stops. So I have 1, 2, 2 out of 4. So it's 2/4 is my first fraction. Now I need to look at I start at 0 again, and I go to 1. So 1, 2, 3. Now I'm dealing with thirds. So, there we go, thirds. So now I'm going to count 1, 2 out of the 3. So now 2/3. And when we compare fractions, we can look at this picture right here and we can see that 2/3, this blue space for 2/3 is bigger than 2/4. So that can tell us that 2/3 is greater than 2/4. Another way we've been practicing is by doing something called bottoms up. We start with the 4, which is on the bottom of the fraction, and we go up. And 4 times 2 is 8. And then we go from the bottom of the other fraction up to the top, and 3 times 2 is 6. So we can see by looking at those numbers there, the 6 and the 8, that the 8 is larger. So since this 8 is larger on this side, that makes the fraction 2/3 larger than 2/4. Okay, now let's take a look at the mixed numbers we're going to get. Let's figure out what our two mixed numbers will be. First, let's look at our whole numbers. Okay, we're going to start at 0, and we go to 1 and 2. Okay, so I see here that this is less than 1. So let's start at 0, 1, and now it's between 1 and 2. What is my denominator? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Since there's 4 spaces, that tells me my denominator is 4. What is my numerator then? Well, we start at 1 whole. We go 1, 2 spaces. So that tells me that my numerator is 2, because I went to 2 out of 4 spaces. And then I also have to look at my whole number, and my whole number is right here. I started at 1 each time I did my hops. So that would show me that it's 1 and 2/4. I could also look at this like it is an improper fraction. If it is an improper fraction, I would start counting here, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I did 6 hops, out of each space between each whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 spaces, meaning that this would be fourths. Just like it is right here in a mixed number, it still keeps the 4 here in an improper fraction. Okay, let's go to our next number line. 0 is a whole number, 1 is a whole number, 2 is a whole number. So we're going to start at 1 because that's the closest whole number right before our fraction. So I'm going to write down 1 because I'm starting on 1. Let's figure out my denominator, my number that's down on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 spaces between the whole numbers. 0, let's see, between 0 and 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Between 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now let's figure out my numerator. Starting on 1, I have 1, 2, and that's 2 out of 6. 1, 2 out of 3, 4, 5, 6. Now to compare these, I take a look and I see, well, my whole numbers, they're the same. Since my whole numbers are the same, then all I have to do is like I did before, I'm going to do bottoms. I'm starting on the bottom of one fraction, the 6, times the 2, and 6 times 2 is 12. And then I start on the bottom of my other fraction, and I go up to the top of my other fraction, so bottoms up. 4 times 2 is 8. And then I take a look, which number is bigger? Is 12 larger or is 8 larger? And I see that the 12 is larger, so that tells me that 1 and 2/4 is greater than 1 and 2/6. So the big number, remember, gets eaten up. The mouth opens to the larger number.